Richard speak, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Richard Bumann, our guest speaker. As many of you know, Richard is a resident of Olivenhain and author of The Colony of Olivenhain, a detailed account of the German immigrants who moved here in the 1880s. Richard is also a descendant of some of the original colonists, and while this really impresses me, while still quite a very young man, he realised the importance of the history here locally, and he started to collect stories, photographs, documents relating to the colony and their descendants. And if it wasn't for Richard, we wouldn't be aware of a lot of this. So thanks to Richard's meticulous research and his dogged collection of stories and lore, the book is a fascinating and entertaining account of the German colony and the community that grew out of it and farmed here well into the 20th century. I won't waste any more time. I'm really eager to hear Richard's talk.
Good day. This is a tailor shop in Denver, Colorado. Marked by X is my great-grandfather, Richard Bumann. He and his son, Herman, worked there. A short distance down the street was a bar named Ulrich's Bar. It was there that the Bumanns and other German immigrants came to know Theodor Penther. Penther was organizing a German colony, and by his energetic and convincing description, sparked an interest in those present. Months before, Penther had seen a newspaper advertisement offering a large rancho in Southern California. Penther realized an opportunity to help his fellow German immigrants and at the same time provide a huge financial profit for himself. The rancho was 4,431 acres and named the Rancho Las Encinitas. The seller was Frank Kimball, who Penther began an ongoing correspondence. The colony was officially launched in May of 1884, and membership grew quickly. The primary campaign tool was newspaper advertisements, placed in Denver and other cities across the United States. It was initially called the California Colony, but soon changed to Colony Olivenhain, possibly influenced by Frank Kimball, who was the father of the olive industry in San Diego County. Olivenhain is composed of two German words. Oliven means olive, and Hain means grove. Membership continued to increase, and in August 1884, Theodor Penther and his close associate, Conrad Struble, traveled to Southern California to select the colony land. They signed a contract with Frank Kimball to purchase the Rancho Las Encinitas for $15 an acre. That sounds like a lot. Remember, Frank bought it for $1.18 an acre. The first group of colonists would arrive on the rancho in early November 1884. The colonists would temporarily reside in the old rancho adobes, known today as Stagecoach Park in Carlsbad. This photo shows the buildings as ruins in 1972. In the first 2 months, the colony surveyed and subdivided southeast corner of the rancho into 5-acre parcels. Each colonist could select any parcel, which would also include a house. If the colonists had paid their full membership into the colony, which was $500, they would receive a full house. This is the house for Wilhelm Werle, with Marie Werle standing on the left-hand side. If the colonist was lacking in total membership fees, a shanty would be built. About 80% of all buildings constructed in 1885 were shanties. This one was built for Charles Licker and is now on exhibit next to the meeting hall. The largest house built in 1885 was the one for the Beck family. This large house could accommodate the Beck family of 12 and provide an income as a hotel, which Herman Beck had named the Germania Hotel. Additional colonists arrived each week. By March 1885, 300 colonists would be on the colony land. Most were bachelors. A few were married with children. Well drilling had been delayed for many months. Finally, in mid-March, the well drilling company moved their equipment onto the colony land. The first well was drilled, and it was dry. Additional wells also proved dry. Only near the Escondido Creek was water found in abundance. Without water, the colonists believed the colony would fail and they would lose everything. At this same time, the colonists also discovered that Penther and Struble were receiving a commission for the sale of the rancho. Penther could receive $10,000. Struble, a house and property in National City. The colonists were outraged, and anger quickly turned to violence. Penther was held prisoner for several days and vigorously questioned. Some colonists desired to hang him. Both Penther and Struble were rejected from the colony by a group of volunteers. Both men became outcasts in the colony they had founded. A legal battle between the colonists and the Kimballs followed. The colonists threatened to totally abandon the rancho. After several months, Kimball agreed that the colony need only purchase the land already developed. Kimball would retain the remainder. Understandably, all the colonists were disappointed. At first, only a few would leave. But this would soon become a stampede, and by 1887, 80% of the colonists would leave the colony settlement. Most of the farms became abandoned and fell into disrepair. Many of the colonists returned to their former locations in the Midwest and eastern states. Others relocated to San Marcos, Escondido, and Fallbrook. A few would homestead on lands near the colony settlement. These included August Smith, shown here in this 1895 photo with his horse Charlie. Their first home, shown in this photo burned to the ground in 1896. Bernard rebuilt the house, which was later called the Lone Jack Ranch. The road leading to it became Lone Jack Road. The Wiggin family homesteaded along Aliso Canyon Road. This 1893 photo shows Christina holding Amelia, the mother of Herb Scott. Adam is in the center, then Herman and Elizabeth. Elizabeth would become the mother to George and Richard Scott. And on the right is Alwyn. The Herman Bumann at Homestead, shown in this 1935 photo when it was 480 acres. For whatever reason, about 75 people remained on the colony land. These people and their descendants would populate and farm Olivenhain for the next 70 years. These would include the Lewis and Helene Dink family, shown here in about 1899. Lewis is holding Bruno, who would become a major lima bean grower in Olivenhain. John Esselsdorfer at his home in about 1910. His wife, Kate, had already passed away when this photo was taken. The George Tausch house with visiting neighbors. The Lickert Ranch in about 1905. The home remains today along Coal Ranch Road. Herman and Cathryn Beeks and their 10 children. The girl on the front right is Josephine, who I spoke to in the mid-1970s. She was in her mid-90s at the time and could recall many things about early Olivenhain, including going to school in the then abandoned home of Theodore Penther. The Friedrich and Anna Tatum family came in about, this photo in it was taken of them in about 1900. They joined the colony in 1892 and were the last colonists. They purchased the property and home once owned by Theodore Penther. Occupationally, the colonists were tradesmen. George Tausch, a glass worker. Louis Dink, a cobbler. Fred Tatum, a blacksmith. Herman Bumann, a tailor. With the exception of a very few, all would become farmers. The colonists started growing corn and grain no later than 1887, thus establishing a food supply and an income. Corn was the staple crop for about 20 years, and fields from 5 to 30 acres were annually planted. The grains, such as barley and wheat, were grown on ever larger fields. Animal feeds, such as Canota oats, were always in demand. All field crops in Olivenhain were dry farmed, meaning they were irrigated by seasonal rainfall. This is Wilhelm and Caroline Fout, near their home in about 1897. Note the corn to their back. This is what I believe an early photo of the Tatum Ranch. Also note the cornfield in the foreground. Early harvesting methods relied on horse teams. This is a horse-powered hay press in use in about 1909. The press ram, located near the A-frame, opened and closed twice with each revolution of the sweep team. When the ram opened, hay was pitched into the ram and sometimes compressed by foot. When the ram closed, one flake was created in the bale. A finished bale weighed about 150 pounds. This is possibly the Cole family, as Hattie is standing in the center of the A-frame. The ladies served food from a portable cook wagon in 1911. The men are baling hay with a full sweep press. Gerhardt Cole is standing on the mule. Florence Peters and Hattie Hess are in the doorway, and Clarence Cole is sitting on the barrel. Here we're harvesting barley with a header. A header operator controlled 6 horses, 3 in each hand. The rudder wheel was turned by a rudder board held between his legs. To drive a header, particularly to turn one, required considerable skill and endurance. The best in the area was John Tatum, shown here. The header box wagon received its crop from the elevator spout. There were 2 to 3 header wagons, depending on the size of the wheat field. Carl Tatum is driving the wagon, Carl Finch is stacking. Because it was pushed through the field, a header eliminated crop damage from the horses. The height of the sickle bar was adjustable to minimize the percentage of straw, thus the name header. Most headers cut a 14-foot swath. Also note the young horses tied to the header. They're in training to become accustomed to the sight and sounds of the machine. Once again, John Tatum is driving the header. Bill Worrell is standing second from the right in the box wagon. Photographer would be standing near Wirral Park, facing west. Threshing grain with the aid of an early gas engine. Bill, Marie, and Lena Worrell are standing below the A-frame. Very often, families banded together to help one another during harvest time. Baling hay in about 1908. This Hart Bar tractor and baler belonged to Emil Lickard. He was heavily in debt, and to save a little bit of time would oil the baler while it was running. Possibly a few months after this photo was taken, Emil was oiling the baler and was pulled into the machine. He left a wife and a 2-year-old dog. It was a tragedy, never forgotten. Potatoes were grown for a short time in Olivenhain, mostly in the 1930s. Mary Dinkins may recognize this area. Her parents' driveway and house would later be on the right-hand side of this photo. Their cistern on the hill in the background. Before I move on, there's something to clarify. Some feel that because it's Olivenhain, there must have been olive groves. In fact, there were very few olive trees. In the background is the largest grove ever known. It was a financial failure and removed in 1915. Oh, and did you notice Albert Lickard? Albert could talk and work, but he was mentally retarded. It's probably unwise to stand in front of a hay rake with a hitched team. The residents of Olivenhain had survived a colony breakdown and developed common occupational trends, and during the process had become a very close-knit community. To celebrate their 10-year anniversary, they would build a meeting hall. As constructed in 1895, it was one large room. The primary carpenter was Bill Dunks, shown here with his wife Johanna and children. Bill was paid $6 for building the meeting hall. We need him over at the Heritage Ranch.
Yes,
A back addition was added in 1916 by members of the Olivenhain Owl Club, initially intended to be a men and ladies dressing room and hallway. No one knows how many social events have taken place in the meeting hall over its past 120 years. Here's a Saturday night dance in the 1940s. Note Richard Scott on the left-hand side. Five stores had opened and closed in Olivenhain before the 1920s. This is the Berg store in about 1900. John Berg is in the doorway, and horse on the far right is Billy Boy. Some said John Berg had anything from a sewing needle to dynamite. You name it, and he'd have it. This store was used from 1886 to 1911. The photographer would be standing on Rancho Santa Fe Road facing east. The trees on the left-hand side are on the meeting hall block. The meeting hall would be just out of view on the left-hand side. The Olivenhain School was located on the corner of Coal Ranch Road and 7th Street. This is Lena Winters of the class of 1909. Children graduated after completing 8 years. Very few Olivenhain children attended high school. The school served Olivenhain for 54 years. In 1943, it was moved to the San Dieguito Union High School and used as a classroom for an additional 25 years. Some of us have gone to school in that. It was a band room when I was younger. You remember it. Lima beans were introduced to the Olivenhain farmers in about 1905. A few planted small fields and found they grew extremely well. By 1910, limas had revolutionized the farming industry and totally eliminated corn production. Limas became the dominant crop in Olivenhain for the next 50 years. This may be the Tatum family. Limas were planted in late April and early May. Alex Lux on the tractor, John Tatum on the lima bean seeder. Stan Cole now owns and operates this Alice Chalmers tractor. Limas were cut in late August and all of September. Here is John Tatum on a bean sled. A knife at the bottom cut the beans at ground level. In early September, the threshing machines were moved into the fields where needed. Threshing and cutting were usually done simultaneously, threshing during the day and cut and windrow at night. I remember it well. The tractors would have their headlights and it would wake me up. Threshing machines began their work in mid-September and worked through to the end of October. This is a medium-sized thresher requiring about 22 men to operate. Average output was about 25,000 pounds a day. This brasherie was jointly owned by John Tayton, Clarence Cole, and Garfield Ramsey. Photo is about 1920. Some farmers, including Bruno Dink, John Tayton, the Wiggins, and the Coles, began farming hundreds of acres in Olivenhain, as well as in Salada Beach, Leucadia, and Green Valley. Bruno Dink alone farmed 1,900 acres, and in 1942 threshed out 350 tons of limas. This photo was taken in Fish Canyon, now known as Manchester Preserve. 1952 was another highly profitable year for the farmers, but it would be a turning point. A succession to average and to poor farm years followed. The now aging farmers were also burdened by increased taxes and wages. Bruno Dink stopped farming on a large scale in 1957. Although some farming would continue into the 1970s, by the late 1950s and the early 1960s, it was apparent that the farming era in Olivenhain was coming to an end. In 1961, the formation of the Olivenhain Municipal Water District and its distribution of imported water would allow Olivenhain to transform into its present residential status. Ray Chavez established a real estate office on the northwest corner of Encinitas Boulevard and Rancho Santa Fe Road. He could see the retiring farmers and the farmland now with imported water, and realized what was about to happen. Development started gradually, but accelerated with each passing year. By 1971, many of the farm fields had given way to residential development. Some protested the development, but did little to stop the desired progress. The Dink Ranch would become a shopping center. Empty fields would fill with residential development. Olivenhain has blossomed into a beautiful upscale community. It was incorporated into the city of Encinitas in 1986. Let's conclude with a newspaper article from the San Diego Union, printed 1889. Olivenhain, which was settled a few years ago, is beautiful and prosperous. Many of the first settlers, through fraud and misrepresentation of their agents, suffered much loss and disappointment. But those who have remained are thriving. No doubt Olivenhain will be one of the coziest spots in Southern California. My name is Richard Bumann. Thank you for watching.